It is waiver wire time. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Fantasy Football Today. We are presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. So, yeah, we've got waiver wire names at each position for you. You should be looking at week 7, but also take a look ahead to week 8. We'll talk about that a little bit throughout the show. I'm Adam Aizer with Dave Richard and Jamey Eisenberg. Before we get to the waiver wire, raise your hand if you have any 6-0 teams. Oh, all right. Congratulations, Jamey. How many undefeateds?
2 if you include Guillotine, 1 just redraft league.
Oh, wait, Guillotine leagues count as undefeated?
You haven't lost.
I'm in.
No way. No way. What a technicality we've got right there. All right, listen, Dave and Jamey are ranking Mike Evans and CeeDee Lamb. That's pretty big news, especially as it relates to the Buccaneers wide receivers. We're going to start with wide receivers. But before we start with wide receivers, let's start with just our top 3 overall priorities on the waiver wire. You guys have very similar lists, maybe different order. Dave, how would you rank these 3 guys, Vidal, Fannin, and Zonovan Knight?
Vidal's number 1. We saw how good he played last week. It was against the Dolphins. It's a little concerning because he's not going to play a defense that bad every single week. But the Colts run defense, ask Zonovan Knight how they looked. He scored on them. He and Michael Carter didn't have great efficiency against them. But I think Kamani Vidal has the opportunity. That's the key. He also made an impact in the passing game. Should be the lead running back for the Chargers, whose offensive line in time will get healthier. Number 2 on the list for me is Zonovan Knight. And number 3 is Harold Fannin. It's interesting. There's a lot of receivers that are worth picking up this week, but none of them crack the top 3. These are the players that I think could be impactful this week for sure, and those that don't have buys in week 8 that week as well.
Right. We're not expecting David Njoku at this point, so Fannin jumps into a very exciting role in a matchup against Miami. Vidal, no, he doesn't have the Dolphins every week, but the Colts, they haven't been great against running backs. They've allowed 12.4 or more PPR fantasy points to a running back in every game. After that, Minnesota, they've been struggling a little bit against the run, so it's not the worst schedule for Vidal. You know, Jamey, I had a situation come up in one of our leagues, and, whatever. I shouldn't be telling you this, but, I have got some fab left, and Vidal is available. And I think he might be worth all of my fab. I have less than 50% of the original budget, let's just say. At what point in the year, I'm not going to do it because I think it's a mistake to lose all of your fab in week 7. At what point in the year, though, would you be comfortable having almost no fab left? Does that matter to you? What is your thought on that?
I have no fab left, for example, in our Superflex league because I stupidly bid on Jake Browning. That's a league where, trying to get, a starting quarterback, and I thought that would be the case for the Bengals. So it's obviously case specific. I think at this point, if you're sub 500, certainly 2 or 3 games under 500, at some point you're going to be out of it if you don't try and rectify the situation. So you should spend as much as you have because it does you no good when you're looking at the playoffs and, hey, I got all this fab left while you're out of, not playing in your league. So I think it depends on what your record is. But in the case of above 500, I love my roster. Just remember, we've now gone through this. Rico Dowdle, Rachaad White. Now it's Kamani Vidal. There's going to be, unfortunately, another series of injuries that are going to occur. And, it's why we say pick up Emmanuel Wilson now. It's why we say pick up Isaiah Davis now. These type of players that at some point could be relevant because you want to get ahead of it. Think about it last week. You could have had Kamani Vidal for maybe 10 or 12 bucks. Now you might have to spend 50. And so if you're ahead of these things, it helps you out in a big way. But I think if your record is struggling right now, your team is struggling right now, and he's the type of player that can potentially save you, spend as much as you have to.
Fair enough. All right, so we're going to start with wide receivers because there are so many injuries at wide receiver. Puka Nacua, Emeka Egbuka, the latest 2, plus Calvin Ridley, Garrett Wilson. Man, it is wild out there. So here are the top waiver wire wide receivers according to Jamey. We'll get Dave's take as well. Kayshon Boutte, widely available. That's the exciting thing. Look at the roster percentages here. Almost everyone is available in more than 70% of CBS leagues or thereabouts. Boutte, Downs, Coker, Luther Burden, Tutu Atwell. Why Tutu Atwell? Well, he was very good without Kupp and Nacua last year. No Nacua, we think, this week. He's a big play guy. The Jaguars give up a lot of big plays. But, Jamey, take us through this list. And are any of these guys even, top 30 options this week?
I don't think they should be. You could maybe make a case if there's no DJ Moore, Luther Burden coming off the bye. We saw him, I know it wasn't because everybody was great. It was because everybody really struggled. But he did lead the Bears in receptions and was second in receiving yards against the Commanders. There's the case for maybe Iomander, new coach, maybe no Calvin Ridley, that he could be a potential starter. But I think for the most part, you're looking at 3 receiver leagues, maybe a flex. The thing that I like about Booty is that he has been playing the most of the Patriots wide receivers. He's playing the most snaps. And so 2 of 6 games, he's been over 16 PPR points. The quarterback is playing out of his mind right now. And Adam, we talked about this on Monday. I don't really think they know what their identity is from a pass catcher standpoint, because we thought, okay, this is now Diggs becoming the thing, and he's going to run away with being the number 1 guy. And then all of a sudden, here comes Kayshon Boutte. Hunter Henry's had some good moments. Obviously, Demario Douglas makes the 2 big plays against the Saints. So I think it's going to be one of those ebbs and flows of whoever's the hot hand. Maybe they ride it for a couple of weeks. So I do think Boutte has a chance to maybe help you in the short term. But Josh Downs could be really good this week because I think Tyler Warren potentially could struggle. You're looking at Jalen Coker, who's got a huge upside if he gets on the field. We've just been waiting for it now for a couple of weeks. And then Darius Slayton, I think if you don't need a wide receiver, Jackson Dart is playing well. Hopefully starts to throw the ball a little bit better on top of that, and he's going to be the number 1 guy. Him and Wan'Dale Robinson, 1 and 1A, however you want to look at it. So great opportunity for him as well.
Dave, your thoughts on the wide receivers this week?
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a different list. I like Downs the best of the 3. We've seen him get 11 or more PPR points each of his last 2 games. I think he's going to get involved a little bit more in how Indianapolis rolls, and I think he's just the safer one. And he's someone who could be good short term. We're going to need receivers not just this week, but next week too. There are 6 teams on bye in week 8. We've already talked about it. Look at the receivers that are going to be on bye in week number 8. It's going to be crazy. Try setting your lineup for week 8. You'll see how many receivers are missing for that week. Josh Downs is a good replacement for them. I think Jalen Coker also needs to be talked about a lot more. We've talked about him plenty over the last month or so because he's been on IR, but Carolina can use him as one of those big slot receivers. He can take a little bit of pressure off of Ted McMillan. They really haven't found a number 2 targeter. They've tried with League Ed. They've tried with their tight ends. I think Jalen Coker's the guy. We're just not 100% sure that he's going to be ready to go. And we know that Carolina, over the last 2 weeks anyway, they've started to run the ball a lot better. It's been in favorable matchups. And I'm thinking long term with Alec Iomander in Tennessee. Calvin Ridley's hurt. We don't know how long he's going to be out for. And really, this offense is a mess, but they're changing head coaches. They're going to put in some new wrinkles in their offense. Iomander should at least get an opportunity to not only play more, he's already been playing a lot, but to see more targets. And that's somebody who's worth stashing, not necessarily starting. Those are my 3 favorites. And the reason why Boutte isn't there for me is because before this week, he was under 10 PPR points in 4 straight games. The Patriots want to get better at running the football. Stephon Diggs is going to break out again at some point. And I just don't know if I can find consistency with Kayshon Boutte over the next week to 3 weeks.
It's funny, you keep saying we got to worry about the buys for week 8 and the wide receivers who are going to be missing. They're already missing. Marvin Harrison may not play. He's on a bye next week. Puka Nacua may not play. He's on a bye next week. I mean, this has just been brutal for what we're talking about here. So the funny thing about trying to plan for next week is, do you have the roster space to carry guys for 2 weeks in the hope of them being available for you for week 8? It's brutal right now. So I don't really want to worry about week 8. I got to get through week 7 with all of these roster problems that we have. So it's great to plan ahead. If you have the ability to do so, kudos to you. I don't think many fantasy managers do have that luxury, though.
Yeah, and I'll be completely honest with you. I already did my waivers I'm in 12 leagues. I did my waivers for all of them. And wide receiver was actually the position that I barely made any claims, especially compared to a normal week. And I just don't really love any of these guys. But the one that I'm most interested in is the Buccaneers situation. That spread is now up to, that total is now up to 53. It was 52.5 this morning. We're expecting a big shootout in this game against the Lions. And with Evans coming back, it made it so much less attractive. But who's your favorite Bucs wide receiver to pick up off the waiver wire this week, Jamey?
So I changed my opinion after talking to Greg Allman, who covers the team for Fox Sports. He said of the non-Mike Evans guys, Sterling Shepard's the one that he would feel the most comfortable with, because from what we've seen from Tez Johnson and Cameron Johnson, there's just a little bit too much volatility. They could clearly both make plays. Cameron Johnson caught his first NFL pass last week. He had 4 catches, did a great job with all the injuries there. Tez Johnson's been playing a lot, but only had 1 catch in that game. I think Sterling Shepard, 11 PPR points or more in 2 of his last 4 games. He's got the safest floor and maybe has a high ceiling just like all these other guys because of all the injuries and now the suspension for Branch. So I think there's a chance that one of the other two guys could pop off, but I'll take Shepard right now just based on what I think his floor could be. And I think there's some long-term ability there as well because Godwin is most likely not going to be playing anytime soon.
I agree. I think Shepard's the one to go with Tez Johnson, an honorable mention second. And I wonder if he's going to be the one that we actually gravitate toward if he has a big game in Week 7 because the Bucs play the Saints in Week 8.
All right. Well, we've got quarterbacks to talk about. You don't have Lamar Jackson again. You don't have Josh Allen this week. Who should you pick up? Waiver wire quarterbacks when we come back. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. So think about this. Last week, Week 6, Daniel Jones, Jackson Dart, Sam Darnold. They were all top 7 quarterbacks in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. They were all waiver wire guys at one point this season, and 2 of them are still waiver wire guys in a lot of leagues, Darnold and Jackson Dart. We're going to talk about those guys, mostly Jackson Dart. Before we get into that, guys, though, I think it's time that we play a little game, America's 28th favorite fantasy football game. It is called Who Has More? Everyone's excited. All right. Who has more rushing yards this year? Jackson Dart or Kyler Murray?
Jackson Dart.
Jackson Dart.
Oh, you guys are terrible at this. It is Kyler Murray by 6 yards. But this one's interesting. Who has more
I was
rushing
looking ahead to Week 7, so sorry.
Who has more rushing yards, Jackson Dart or Lamar Jackson?
Wow, Lamar's played 3.
Right. Yeah, just
games.
by nature of that, you'd think that it's Dart.
I'll
But
say
Dart's only made 3 starts. Jackson's made 4.
I'll say Dart.
Dart by 1 yard, 167 to 166. All right. Well, he is someone to talk about here. He does get the Broncos. But let's take a look at the waiver wire quarterbacks. We're getting 20 fantasy points out of any of these guys, 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. Jamey, what do you think?
I think Rodgers will get there. 4 of the 6 quarterbacks against the Bengals have gotten over 20 fantasy points. He's coming off a 21-point game against the Browns. He's only the second quarterback to go over 16 fantasy points against Cleveland. That defense has been fantastic against every quarterback so far this year. So I think Rodgers is playing well. I think he's got a great matchup. It'd be nice if he gets Calvin Austin back, just to get another weapon in the passing game. But I think with what he's gotten out of DK Metcalf, should get out of him on Thursday night, what the running backs will provide, he'll sort of find somebody else to step up, whether it's somebody in the tight end group, maybe another wide receiver. He's worth starting as a low-end number 1 quarterback just based on the matchup and the way that he's playing.
Adam, you can make the case that almost every name on this list has potential to get 20 fantasy points in a 6-point for passing touchdown league and maybe even in a 4-point for passing touchdown league. Rodgers' matchup is the stuff that dreams are made of. It's Cincinnati. They have a ton of points. It's 25 in 3 of their last 5. Jamey's stat was great, too. And I think Rodgers makes sense as a start this week, and you could potentially use him next week if you've really been in a pinch with the quarterback position. You're streaming the position. You could roll with him in the revenge game against Green Bay. Much tougher matchup, obviously, but we've seen him in a revenge game against a decent defense already this year, and he had a ton of touchdowns. Dart is also interesting long term. I wouldn't want to use him this week against Denver because Denver's done a great job against quarterbacks this year. But he's also gone up against tough matchups, Dart has, and he's come through with at least 19 fantasy points. That's 6-point per passing touchdown leagues, each of his first 3 starts. And if he does well this week and you stash him this week, you might be empowered to start him the week after when he has the rematch with Philadelphia in week number 8.
Yeah, one more thing to think about for Aaron Rodgers is that they are playing Thursday, as mentioned. Well, Trey Hendrickson, best edge rusher for the Bengals, he's going to be questionable. He's got a chance to play, but he left with a back injury, short week. That might be an edge to Aaron Rodgers as well, who finally threw the ball downfield. He gave DK Metcalf 4 deep ball targets, 20 or more air yards in week 6. Metcalf had 1 in the first 4 games of the season combined. Now, do you guys think Jackson Dart is a potential league winner? Not this week, but after this week?
So after he gets this week's matchup against Denver, Philly, like we said, he did well against them, 25 fantasy points in the first game. But as we talked about in our podcast, Jalen Carter didn't play. They're missing some guys defensively. After those 2 games, though, he gets Chicago and San Francisco. And those are favorable matchups for him where he can have the ability to potentially play at that level that we saw in that Philadelphia game. The nice thing about it is he's using his legs. We love that for fantasy leagues. Can he get some help in the passing game? Well, I think Darius Slayton is a nice piece. I don't know if he's an alpha, but he certainly can help. Did not have him in that game against Philadelphia. So league winner, I mean, could he get you in that 22 to 24 point per game range? I mean, if you're pivoting to Dart, and who you're pivoting from, so if you've been streaming since the Joe Burrow injury, he's a great replacement option. If you've been pivoting since Lamar Jackson, you're going to go back to Lamar Jackson the minute he's healthy. So it obviously depends on who else we're talking about here. But you said it, Adam. Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold, we found guys off waivers. They've been good for portions of the season. Darnold the last 2 weeks. Mac Jones has been helpful for fantasy managers. It's the easiest position to stream. And so just ride Dart hot streak when he's on it. And I think the best 2 games will come against the Bears and the 49ers.
So when you look at this week's slate, right, and Aaron Rodgers being the best waiver wire quarterback, are there any quarterbacks that you have been starting that you would bench for one of the waiver wire guys? I'm thinking maybe Justin Fields without Garrett Wilson, although he does have a great matchup.
Yeah, I'm still starting Fields.
Not me.
Okay. Bo Nix against the Giants. He's been, probably better IRL than he has in fantasy. That stands for in real life. Dave, any names come to mind for you? And let's talk about Fields, right? Because people are wondering if they should drop him.
No, I wouldn't drop Fields. Everyone knows what IRL stands for also, Adam. I think that Justin Fields will have a chance to put up some good numbers again. And he needs to throw as well as run. He can't do it all rushing. He does a good job running the ball. I'm thinking about comparing him to Jackson Dart. Like, to me, Dart's more efficient. He's more accurate. He can read defenses better than what we've seen from Justin Fields. But there have been games, you can't take it away from Justin Fields, where he looks like he knows what he's doing and the numbers have been great. And so I'm hoping that one of these next 2 games, he shows us that. It's hard to believe in when he doesn't have his number 1 receiver, the guy that's been making plays for him all year long. Garrett Wilson's not going to play in week number 7. I would guess that he's not going to play in week number 8, and then the Jets have a bye in week number 9. If you've got the guts to start Justin Fields, I hope you've got a great team to go along with him, because the floor for him is worse than probably 2/3 of the quarterbacks that you would consider starting.
I mean, it's based totally on his rushing potential, and that's what Justin Fields has been great at. So it's not going to be one of his better starts. I don't think we're going to get over the 29 fantasy points, but Carolina stinks. Every quarterback against them so far this season, except for Michael Penix. Certainly the last 4.
Who was a total mess in that game.
Yeah,
kind of like Fields was.
Excuse me, the last 3 guys. You have Drake May, didn't have a great day throwing the ball, scored a rushing touchdown. You had Tua Tagovailoa, first game without Tyreek Hill, his best game of the season. Dak Prescott's obviously playing at a very high level right now. So look, Fields is risky. I understand that, but what he does with his legs, I think this is going to be a game where they run some more. It's going to be Fields, it's going to be Breece Hall. I think the Jets are going to be fine with what Justin Fields provides in this matchup, and I think he's going to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, I look at the schedule and I go, am I starting him against Carolina and Cincinnati? Well, heck yeah, I'd want to, but without Garrett Wilson, I just don't know. And then you got to bye. And then Cleveland, New England, Baltimore, Atlanta. He might be fool's gold right now. It's going to be a tough call. You can see the difference of opinion.
I would start Rodgers over Matthew Stafford, for example, this week.
How about Kyler Murray?
Yeah, I would start
Rodgers over Kyler. I might start Fields over Kyler, too.
Yeah, Stafford without Puka, I don't want any part of that.
We didn't talk about Penix, but Jake Matthews got a good report after the game. He might be able to come back this week, their left tackle. You think about this game against Buffalo, 16.6 fantasy points, coming off a game where he scored nearly 23 fantasy points against Washington. Remember, Drake London was a foot away from having a touchdown at the end there, and everything fell apart without the left tackle in the second half. But could be a high-scoring game against San Francisco. And then we love the fact that Michael Penix has Miami in Week 8 when there are 6 teams on a bye. But is Penix kind of a sneaky start? I mean, we kind of skipped over him in the episode we did this morning, other than talking about him for Week 8. Does anybody like Penix for Week 7?
I don't really like him for Week 7 because there are so many other quarterbacks that I think have a higher ceiling with the same type of floor that Penix has. But if you want to grab him, and you should be able to get him the Saturday before Week 7 games start, so that way you've got a guy to replace Sam Darnold or Matthew Stafford or any of the other, Jared Goff, the quarterbacks who are on bye in Week 8, you could do that because that matchup against Miami should be very favorable for him. Maybe by then, Darnell Mooney is A, back, B, playing at a high level, and Drake London obviously is a superstar. I like that idea. Conceptually, that's smart because you're taking advantage of a matchup that's happening in the future. You know it's going to happen. Penix will be there. And it doesn't really matter how bad that offensive line is. We saw it from the Chargers. Their offensive line is bad. And Justin Herbert still had a good game against Miami.
All right, last question, guys. If you're going to take a shot on anyone this week, Bryce Young, other than Rodgers, Dart, whatever. Bryce Young, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Flacco, Carson Wentz.
Lawrence is interesting. 22 or more fantasy points each of his last 2 games. They're going to struggle to run against the Rams, so I think we'll see him have to throw. The nice thing about Brian Thomas coming back is that's clearly something that would help Trevor Lawrence. So wouldn't surprise me if he has a good game in London. Not necessarily a huge game, but in that 20 to 22 point range.
I feel like he's safer than Bryce Young because Bryce Young did have that great game last week. He needed a bunch of touchdowns to do it. This Jets defense isn't very good, but they're also going to be able to run it. And that could be something that could hold back Bryce Young from having a big game.
Trevor Lawrence would have had a 30-point game against Seattle. If not, you don't know how the rest of the game would have played out. But if not for that offsides penalty on Travis Hunter that negated a 54-yard touchdown pass. All right, those are your quarterbacks. We've done wide receivers and quarterbacks. Let's talk about Kamani Vidal and some running backs when we come back. We're looking at running backs you can pick up off the waiver wire to help you in week 7 and perhaps beyond as we welcome you back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. So Kamani Vidal was rostered in 56% of leagues on Sunday and Monday. He's already up to 61% of leagues. Those are just the leagues that don't do waivers. They just do free agency, have fun, go pick him up. Come on now. So he's going to be the most added player at running back, I would think. Now, before we get into that, let's play America's 27th favorite fantasy football game show. Who has more rushing yards this year? Kamani Vidal or Travion Henderson?
Henderson's probably in the neighborhood of averaging around 25 per game. I'm going to say Henderson, but it's close.
It is. You nailed it. It is Henderson. Congratulations, guys. You win this round. Travion Henderson just barely above Kamani Vidal, who had 124 rushing yards, 14 receiving yards, and a touchdown, more than 22 fantasy points against the Miami Dolphins, 22.8 to be exact. So he's number 1. And then after that, Bam Knight. That's Emerald. You guys heard of him? Tajay Spears and some handcuffs. All right, Dave, why don't you talk about Vidal, Knight, and Spears?
So in the case of Kamani Vidal, he played 70% of the snaps for the Chargers. It was against Miami, had a bunch of touches, a couple of catches too, and he really did very well with them. And part of it is because he took on the Miami Dolphins. They really just do not play defense very well. But the other part of it is that he's talented and that he's able to get some bursts on his runs. And when he finds space, he puts it into top gear. His top gear isn't the same as other running backs' top gear. That's why he was a day 3 pick once upon a time. But he's solid. And on top of that, he's the best that the Chargers have right now. He's got a matchup against Indianapolis this week. Bam Knight just scored on them last week. Indianapolis' run defense is not one of the toughest in the league. It makes perfect sense to look at Kamani Vidal as a number 2 fantasy running back. Maybe a high-end flex at absolute worst if you really think that he'll regress because he's not playing Miami. But he should see the same type of opportunity, meaning 70% of the snaps. I think Indianapolis will give the Chargers more of a game, which might mean less carries for Kamani Vidal, but I think he'll be good. With Bam Knight, we know that he's the running downs guy for the Cardinals. I don't know if Amari DiMercado's absence, first of all, if he's going to be absent, and second of all, if he does play, does that take work away from Knight, and does that give Michael Carter some semblance of a role on running downs, on passing downs? We know last week that they were close in snaps, and that included on third downs. They both played 6 of 14 snaps on third downs. So there could be a little bit of fool's gold when it comes to Bam Knight, but at least he's got some solid opportunities to get you in the neighborhood of 12 to 15 touches. His matchup isn't easy. It's against the Packers, but at least he's at home. And then with Tajay Spears, 9 PPR points last week. You think that's not that great? Well, it's better than what Tony Pollard did. It was a matchup against the Raiders. We know that they were playing from behind in that game. It's going to be like that every week for Tennessee. And I do think that the Titans try to change their offense a little bit. There's not a whole lot they can do in the wake of their coach getting fired. But one of the things they could do is lean into Tajay Spears a little bit more. He played more than 50% of the snaps last week. Maybe they let him catch more passes. Maybe he ends up being a decent flex.
Would you guys rather have Woody Marks or Kamani Vidal?
Vidal.
It's Vidal for this week, but knowing that Omarion Hampton will come back and knowing that Woody Marks has potential to be the number one running back in Houston, I would say Marks rest of season.
That's interesting because what we saw from Woody Marks last week or 2 weeks ago when he played was so discouraging. And then the report from ESPN that they view him, I don't know if I really believe this. It's like, why would you? They view him as basically a passing downs back who had a lot of injury history. So I guess they don't want to overwork him, but why would you trade a 3rd round pick to move up into the 4th round to draft a guy if that's how you view him? That's so silly. But yeah, I don't know. I just look at Marks versus Vidal. Certainly, while Hampton's out, do you think you'd rather have Vidal?
That's fair.
Without question. And the fact that Hampton may not return until later in the year, to me, it's easy, Vidal.
Do you drop like a high-end handcuff for him, like a Blake Corum or Algier or something like that?
For Vidal?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
of course.
Especially if you need a running back.
I would drop Woody Marks for him.
Well, but Woody Marks, I dropped Blake Corum for Woody Marks in a league where I actually have good running backs, and I kind of regret that because, obviously, if I'm in a pinch and I need to start someone, it's Marks. But if Kyron gets hurt, I want Corum, not Marks.
The only thing I would say is based on recent history, there's much more likely a chance that Nick Chubb gets hurt than there is Kyron Williams gets hurt.
Also, I'd rather have the player who's going to play than the player who's only going to play a lot more if somebody gets hurt.
Well,
that contingency upside. I'd rather have the player that's playing now and has a chance to see his role grow. And that's exactly what Woody Marks is.
But I understand Adam's point. If you don't need any of these guys, you're looking at who has the most upside. It's the Zach Charbonnet theory. If Charbonnet ever gets that full-time role, he's a top 5 running back. When he's playing, he's barely a flex. So which one do you want to roster? The one that could maybe help you long-term or the one that's going to help you in the short term, but you're never going to play them? So if I'm never going to play that guy, I'm going to take the guy that has the most upside.
What happened to Blake Corum last year? We went through this with him a year ago where Kyron Williams stayed healthy all year long. Corum was in case of emergency. The emergency never came.
Yeah. I don't want to make this about Corum. I want to make this about handcuffs in general. Now, Vidal, I see as someone that I definitely could be starting for each of the next 3 weeks and maybe even more than that. I'm very encouraged. I don't think this is going to be a Michael Carter situation where we get a report before the game.
No, he played well. Carter did not.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm excited about Vidal. I don't think I would drop a high-end handcuff. I don't even think I'd drop like a Ray Davis, even going into his bye, for someone like Zonovan Knight. I have to be pretty desperate at running back. I'd rather keep a high-end handcuff than Knight, personally. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, I don't know if Ray Davis is the example you want to use, especially going into his bye week, because you could drop him and pick him up probably right before week 8. I think in the case of, some of the other running backs that you could be looking at, then maybe you can make that argument. But I mean, look, right now, Zonovan Knight, first opportunity. Did he do great with it? Not exactly. The one thing, the pro is that he's going to be playing probably for the next 3 weeks. The negative is that Trey Benson hopefully returns by week 10, and then he's the guy for the Cardinals. It's just it's messy, and we don't know what it's going to look like with Kyler Murray back as well. Maybe that helps things out for Zonovan Knight. So I don't know to what degree of handcuff we're talking about here. If it's Ray Davis, then I'm probably going to go with Knight.
All right, I think my point is I have much lower expectations for Knight. He only has 3 targets in 2 games. He had 2. I think Michael Carter, 2 against the Colts. Michael Carter, I think, had 5 targets. It's got to be it's got to be a better running back carry split for Knight. We can't survive with him getting 11 carries. He's going to have to score every game to be worth using in fantasy. And then Spears, Dave talked about him earlier. Let me ask you this. Is there any running back that you think could get traded, and therefore we need to be rostering his backup, Jamey?
Doesn't sound like Alvin Kamara wants to leave, so they would probably have to be overwhelmed with an offer in New Orleans to move him at this point. Breece Hall seems like he could be the most coveted player out there, given the fact that the Jets are struggling, that he's going to be entering a contract year. There could be a surprise. Maybe the Titans decide to move on from a Tony Pollard, let's say, that type of situation. But really the name that I think you got to keep an eye on is Breece Hall.
Okay. All right, we got a lot of tight ends to talk about. It's a fun tight end week. You already heard at the top of the show. Obviously, you've been watching the entire thing, so thank you. That Harold Fannin Jr. is one of our top 3 waiver wire priorities. So I'll think of a who has more during the break, and we'll be back to talk about tight ends after this. Harold Fannin Jr., 15.1 PPR fantasy points at Pittsburgh in week 6. Not expecting David Njoku this week. So what can Fannin Jr. do against the Miami Dolphins in week 7? And, there's something on my mind, guys. Oh, I know it's time to play America's 26th favorite fantasy football game show. Who has more double-digit PPR fantasy point games this season? Harold Fannin Jr. or A.J. Brown?
I think it's Fannin.
3. So Brown has, I'll say Fannin. Brown has 2.
It's so sad. What is sad? We all lose. You guys got it right, but we all lose because A.J. Brown has two games this year with double-digit PPR fantasy points. Anyway, Harold Fannin Jr. is number 1. There's been a little change in your order, Jamey, at the tight end position?
Well, yes, I originally had Cade Otton when I wrote the story last night, and then after, finding out a little bit more from the Bucs situation. So Mason Taylor, I mean, he may get 12 targets in this game. He had 25 targets in the 3 previous games prior to the London game where they were just completely miserable as a team. And now he's, by far, in my opinion, the best pass catcher left for the Jets with Garrett Wilson not expected to play. So taking on in a matchup that's been fantastic for opposing tight ends, I think Mason Taylor's got top 12 upside. So like the setup for him. Fannin and Taylor, to me, are adds and starts right away in week 7.
Dave, your thoughts? Fannin, Taylor, Otton, Mayer, Gadsden, Ingram, Higbee.
Yeah, these are mostly names of tight ends that I don't really want to start if I can help it, except for Fannin, because he's going to have an opportunity against a terrible Dolphins defense, especially if there's no David Njoku, to put up a lot of numbers. And he's going to do it with a lot of targets from Dylan Gabriel. Dylan Gabriel is not challenging downfield very much. I think that's really good for Harold Fannin, who's been winning in that short and intermediate range. I'm not feeling it with Mason Taylor. I just thought last week he could have had some opportunities. He didn't get it. The week before, he was checking down. He was the guy that would catch checkdowns, I should say, from Justin Fields. Maybe there is more of an opportunity. How could he be any worse? But I think about Cade Otton and how he could do the exact same thing in a high-scoring game, and I can trust Cade Otton's quarterback. So if it's for 1 week, I might go Otton over Mason Taylor, kind of like the way that Jamey had it ordered before. But if we're thinking rest of season and you want somebody that you can stash, then I suppose Mason Taylor in PPR is the better guy to go with.
Yeah, I mean, Otton's tough because last year he has this stretch, 18 points against Baltimore with Evans leaving the game early, Godwin leaving on one of the last plays of the game. 29.1 points the week after, 21.7 the week after that. Then a bad game, okay game, 8.5 fantasy points, but he had 8 targets. And then Evans comes back, and he's pretty bad rest of season. And then this year, you think about it, and Otton really hasn't done anything unless Mike Evans has been out. It doesn't really make any sense why Evans would have more of an impact on him than Godwin. And now you throw Ibuka in the mix. He obviously didn't have Ibuka last year, but Ibuka's probably going to be out. So I guess what long-winded way of saying, whenever Evans has been healthy, Otton's basically done nothing. But I'm not really worried about that. I mean, I still feel like he has a really good opportunity here.
I think all these guys have great opportunities. Yeah. This is one, like looking at the position for this week, like there are so many options that you don't necessarily have to move on from the guy you've been starting. I mean, think about this. We haven't been starting Dallas Goedert. He's been fantastic almost every game that he's played this year. Pitts, bad game last week, but prior to that, he's giving you a nice floor and a couple of spike games, certainly the 2 spike games coming without Darnell Mooney on the field. Zach Ertz finally snapped out of his 3-game slump and now has a great matchup this week as well against Dallas. So there are a lot of great options. And then you factor in these waiver wire guys. Michael Mayer, first game that he's played without Brock Bowers. Remember, he had the concussion for 2 games when Bowers was playing, and then Bowers missed the game, so did Mayer. He comes out 5 for 50 and a touchdown. Could easily have a similar stat line, at least even if you take away the touchdown, it's still 10 PPR points. Evan Ingram, 6+ targets in 3 straight games. He's taking on the Giants. We know that's a revenge game. Maybe he gets an opportunity as well. So I think we're just looking at there's about 15 tight ends that I'd be fine starting for this week. But for me, Taylor, we say this all the time. You want the guy that's first or second on this team in targets, and he's got a great matchup. Easy start as a low-end starter, but easy start. And then Harold Fannin, 14 targets in 2 games with Dylan Gabriel. May not have David Njoku. The Dolphins think against tight ends. He's a top 6 tight end for this week.
He's a slam dunk. What about somebody like A.J. Barner, who doesn't get a lot of targets, but does somehow have 10 PPR points in each of his last 3, 4 of his last 5? That's kind of more of a desperation ad for me. I'd still rather have a lot of the tight ends that we talked about, but maybe in those deeper leagues, maybe you need a couple of tight ends, one that can start for you at the tight end position and another one in your flex spot. Maybe in that type of situation, you could look to A.J. Barner, who's finding a way to get it done one way or the other pretty much every week without getting a lot of targets.
Yeah, I don't even have Barner in my top 24 this week. If I'm going desperation at that position, I'm going Tyler Higbee. Potentially no Puka Nacua. He got best game that he had last week, 4 catches, 40 yards, and a touchdown. Jaguars have struggled against tight ends. I think it'd be an easy opportunity for Higbee to come in and be maybe the second best pass catcher for the Rams. So Barner to me is touchdown or bust. I don't like the matchup for him against the Texans. I'll take Tyler Higbee all day long.
Can you guys have a little Mason Taylor versus Michael Mayer debate? Who would you rather have?
Taylor
this week easily.
And rest of season.
Yeah, I mean, look, Bowers can still return this week.
Yeah, okay, fine. For the record, Wilson's not going to play. Bowers more likely to play, but it doesn't really seem all that likely. They have a bye next week, but you're right, he could come. But if they were both out, if Wilson and Bowers were out, would you take Mason Taylor or Michael Mayer?
I'd still take Taylor. I mean, you're talking about a Chiefs defense that for the most part has been good against tight ends traditionally. I know they haven't been as good this year. I do like Mayer's upside. Again, we've talked about this for 2 weeks now. Pick him up in case Bowers doesn't return. We got the game that we wanted last week. But Geno Smith stinks. And now he's got to go into Arrowhead Stadium where he's probably going to throw another 2 or 3 interceptions. I know Justin Fields hasn't been playing well, but this is the only guy that he has. So I think targets are going to definitely favor Mason Taylor. I'll take the guy that has the easier matchup.
And the easier matchup is the way to put it. It's Carolina this week against the Jets. It's not like they're a bastion of amazing defense there. So I could understand you taking the chance on Taylor ahead of Mayer.
I'm going to give you 3 tight ends, and I want you to tell me if you'd move on from them to get Harold Fannin Jr. or anyone else.
Yes.
Alton Kincaid.
Yes. Not playing this week. We don't know when he's going to be back with the oblique injury.
Oh, man, if I saw Kincaid on my waiver wire, though, I'd try and find a way to carry him on my team.
TJ Hawkinson.
Yes.
Bye.
All right, last one's tough because this guy is not usually nearly as good as he's been, but he's been incredible. Dallas Goedert.
No, I would stick with Goddard. I mean,
I think so too.
The way that they're struggling to run the ball right now and how much Jalen Hurts has been relying on Goddard, to me, Goddard's got top 10 upside rest of season.
And just real quick, David Njoku is going to be back at some point. It might be this week. There's a slight chance he does come back this week, but if it's not this week, it could be 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. And when he's back, there's no guarantee that Fannin's going to be any better than 8 PPR points.
Okay. Well, that'll do it for the tight end discussion. We want to hear from you. We've got your questions that we'll be answering when we come back on Fantasy Football Today. All right, we're back, everybody. Welcome back. Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. Oh, come on. I'm not reading a question from this guy.
In my league.
Yeah, it's our buddy, J. Darren Darst, who I'm better than you in the one fantasy league we have. My team is better than yours, but he's in a deep league. Desperately needs a running back 2 for this week. Okay. 5-1. Nice. Woody Marks or Sean Tucker or Blake Corum?
It's Marks, and it's not close.
Yeah, I mean, look, Marks is coming off a bad game, as you noted, Adam, but this is a great matchup. I mean, Seattle's offense is playing well, so the Texans probably chasing points. They've been playing with the lead the last 2 games, and Seattle's struggled with pass-catching running backs, which is what Marks should be able to do. So very good sleeper for this week, and certainly better than Tucker.
And a terrific bye-week replacement at running back.
Yeah, and Darst, why don't you try winning the Office League? You know, it's been about a decade now. Get on the board. From Josh, is Tez an actual pickup? I can see him getting the Emeka targets for sure.
There's such a wild card right now for the Buccaneers wide receivers because Evans coming back it should be Tez Johnson. He was playing ahead of Cameron Johnson, so you hope that this is the guy that maybe gets a few of those opportunities down the field. And it's a great matchup. But as we talked about, could be Evans, could be Cade Otton. I think Sterling Shepard's still going to get his role. So 14-team league, deep league, desperation type of play, absolutely Tez Johnson. But in a 12-team redraft league, I hope you have better options.
This is their field stretcher while Ibuka's out. It has to be because he's so fast when you watch him play, and he was that way in college as well. He had an 84% route rate last week, and they're taking on the Lions. The total's how high, Adam?
75.
Ooh, I might take the under if it's 75.
53.
Okay, and the Lions secondary is banged up / suspended. So there are going to be some real opportunities for the pass catchers in Tampa to get numbers that they might not have been able to get if Detroit's secondary were healthy. So I kind of like Tez Johnson. I just like a couple of other receivers more.
All right, what do we got next here? Ooh, Guillotine League. Jacobs, JSN, and Rico are now on waivers. Ranked them rest of season. Still has 90% of his budget.
You can't spend too much on Rico because we don't know what happens when Chuba Hubbard comes back. So if you're going to spend, you're spending on Jacobs, you're spending on JSN. The nice thing about Jacobs is he's past his bye week already, so you don't have to worry about that, and you can still have him hopefully rest of season. What I would try and do maybe is spend $350, $400 on one of these two guys if you want to try and get both of them. I like to have money toward the end just because I think that's the best route to win in a guillotine league. But if you want to get one of these guys, make sure their bye week's not there. Jacobs, and then spend a little bit of money if he's available on Emmanuel Wilson. Cover yourself with that Packers back.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. You can get Emmanuel Wilson for one. You don't have to worry.
It might be rostered though. It depends on how.
That's I don't know. In a guillotine, it depends how deep the guillotine rosters are, I guess. You could also put in a cheap bid on Rico just in case nobody wants to spend a couple hundred on him. I don't know if there would be much harm if you have 900 left to spend. Call it 70 on Rico Dowdle, and if you're the high bidder, you've got him. And it's not Josh Jacobs' rest of season, but he could still be pretty good.
Okay. Would you drop Justin Fields for Sam Darnold?
If you're concerned, you can do that. I'm going to start Fields over Darnold this week, so I like Fields better.
And I'm not. I'm going to start Darnold over Fields. I love the way that Darnold's been playing. He does have a tough matchup. There's no question about it. But I'd rather have Darnold than Fields if it's just for 1 week. Oh, yeah. Yeah, yes.
It doesn't matter for
Is Kevin Ogletree available?
Maybe
we were talking about him before the show.
Pat Freiermuth.
Pat Freiermuth. Yeah, you could drop these guys. It's an easy call to pivot from Loveland to Fannin at this point.
Yeah. Anybody?
And DJ Moore to one of the receivers we talked about. I mean, we don't even know what the story is.
Like, you hope DJ Moore is healthy and okay.
Sure.
He went to the hospital last night, but what he's been doing or lack thereof, I think you can move on from. Now, I wouldn't do it for the Kayshon Bouttys of the world, but if you want to maybe see what Luther Burden has or even Darius Slayton, I can understand that.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. That is it for Fantasy Football Today. If you enjoyed the show, please check out our Fantasy Football Today podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. Big thanks to Dave Richard and Jamey Eisenberg. And of course, thanks so much to all of you every day for watching and listening. I'm Adam Aizer. We'll talk to you next time on Fantasy Football Today.